With your death, this nightmare will finally end. Out! Strike!
Hit of infinite torches.
This is my best rendition of a Wintertide Brand character in Trials of the Ancestor 3.22. The build features clever use of game mechanics, which completely change how you build a low-life energy shield character, and is able to comfortably do all the content in Path of Exile, including Uber bosses. So I was looking through the PoE.Ninja Wintertide Brand ladder, and I saw that the majority of low-life energy shield characters were using Chevron's Wrappings, the classic low-life unique chest, and I used to be one of them. But in 3.22, this chest really does not hold up to the power level that rare chests with Eldritch Implicits have. The only thing that's going for is that it stops chaos damage from bypassing your energy shield. It has no damage modifiers, and the energy shield that it provides is pretty low for a body armor. In my version of the build, we opt for a rare Sadist Garb, which has high energy shield and evasion, and Eldritch Implicits to give us more damage. This perfectly synergizes with Trickster's Escape Artist Ascendancy, and it is a considerable upgrade from Chevron's Wrappings. The problem we have to solve next is how to prevent chaos damage from bypassing our energy shield. To do this, we use a Coruscating Elixir Ruby Flask to prevent chaos damage from going through our energy shield as long as the flask is active. We use an Instilling Orb to enchant the flask so that it reuses itself at the end of its effect, so we don't have to ever worry about not having 100% uptime. The next problem we have to solve is how we can sustain our Coruscating Elixir. If we're not in a situation where we can kill mobs and generate flask charges, we're going to be in trouble because we can't sustain the flask and we'll get one shot by chaos damage. To solve this problem, we use a Brutal Restraint Timeless Rule dedicated to Babala. This gives us access to the Trader Keystone passive. By giving up 2 flask spots and specking some flask nodes, we can infinitely sustain all 3 of our flasks and now play low life without a Chevron's Wrappings. Going over the pros and cons of the build, starting with pros, first and foremost, this build is an excellent mapper in terms of damage, in terms of defenses, and the speed at which it is able to clear the maps. It's an excellent bosser, it's able to take on all of the mechanics and the things that bosses will throw at you in the endgame, and this build is able to be played as a League Start build, and you can take it all the way up to Ubers and do all the content in the game. For the cons of the build, I will have to say that the dot playstyle and the brand playstyle is definitely not for everyone. Different people prefer different, more active playstyles and not damage over time, but it is what it is. This build is not able to one-shot bosses ever. By nature, damage over time builds are damage over time. So our damage endgame, it will still be good, but it will look pretty ethical in most encounters. And finally, I would say that this build does require some sort of a mid-game item transition because some of the uniques are mandatory in order to get some of the core build functions working. And on a League Start scenario, or if you're just starting without anything, you might not be able to afford some of those items. So most of the time, I usually start with a classic Cold Dot Trickster with the Eldritch Battery and Mind Over Matter setup. And then once I'm able to get some of the unique items, I go to the full low life. But this transition can be challenging or daunting for some players, but it is definitely a necessary part of the transition process. Overall, I think the cons of the build definitely do not overshadow the pros and the strengths of the build, which is why I've played this skill, Wintertide Brand, every league since it came out in 3.13. In fact, I say that if you've previously tried Wintertide Brand and it didn't really work out for you, or if you looking to try some sort of brand or dot skill and you're looking for an interesting build with strong fundamentals, I definitely encourage you give this build a try. I want to take a moment to talk about why we decide to play Wintertide Brand over some of the other skills in the game. I'm not going to compare with every other skill, active skill, but I primarily want to compare with the other cold out skills, namely, the common Vortex, Cold Snap, and other Creeping Frost builds. I think the first advantage that Wintertide Brand has is that it has better clear and range projection. Usually, if you're playing Vortex, Cold Snap, you have to put down a puddle, wait for enemies to walk on them, or you have to throw, a cold area away from you and hope that enemies get hit by it. But with Wintertide Brand, you can just throw brands around, they'll auto-attach, they'll bounce between enemies, clearing packs for you, and you really don't need to worry about it. The second advantage of Wintertide Brand is that it has better damage uptime. You know, you've definitely had boss encounters where the boss is teleporting around, or there are puddles all over the boss room, and there's just no way that you can walk up or through all the obstacles and go drop a vortex on the boss. You know, and even if you could, you know, the boss is going to jump away. But with Wintertide Brand, the brand's always attached to them. You can throw the brands from range. You can hide at the corner of the screen, and you know, you're just always doing damage, and there's no downtime. And I think one of the last advantages is that it's cheaper to build. Partly because no one plays the skill really, but honestly, the gear also doesn't really compete with other cooldown builds. This is especially true because our damage doesn't scale as well with Vortex by prioritizing plus level of gems. So we don't have to you know, compete with other cooldown skills on +2 gems on like our wands or our amulets, which is a great thing. Also, 2120 Wintertide Brand gems are, you know, like 5 chaos usually on league start, but Vortex and other equivalents are usually more than a divine or multiple divines. A strong selling point of this build is that we do not die. Now, damage is great, don't get me wrong. I love to one-shot bosses, and it can be very fun, but honestly, I hate randomly dying every other map because, you know, I've invested all of my skill points into damage. And this character has definitely the damage, but it's also built with substantial defensive layers. With our current setup, we have Determination, Grace, and Defiance Banner. We have a large ES pool. We have All Discipline for emergencies. We have Ghost Shrouds. We have Molten Shell. We recover 16% of our ES per kill, per enemy killed, instantly. We have 90% plus effective spell suppression. We have 100% uptime on all our flasks. We have Onslaught and Hit. Our permanent flask allow us to have 100% uptime on our Quicksilver. Our Mana Flask removes any ailment on use. Our cold skills, they chill everything, slow enemy action speed. And we also run Leaf Shade to deal with damage over time threats in the end game. Just a quick side note, this build is actually a very, very good Sanctum character because we have armor, we have evasion, and we have energy shield. So you have all three of those mitigation sources for your resolve in Sanctum. Just to give you a sense, with my current build, we mitigate about 20% of a resolve loss if you get hit. We have about 20% chance to evade resolve loss when you do get hit, and our resolve Aegis is about 40 damage. This is also a reminder that Sanctum resolves defenses scale with your base armor, evasion, and ES, and does not get increased by, you know, Grace or Determination. In Sanctum, I usually remove Grace and replace it with Haste because we don't die anyways, and especially in Sanctum, we never die. You can even replace your Determination with Zealotry if you pick up some really bad afflictions and you need more damage. When you're putting together this build and deciding what affixes you need on items, there are 3 key breakpoints that you just strive to meet so that the build is able to function. The first point is that you must have enough cast speed to reach maximum stages on Wintertide Brand. The default max stages on Wintertide Brand is 20, and we increased it to 24 with the Helmet enchantment. You can check in POB how many activations your brand has in this duration, and make sure your configuration is correct. You know, check Onslaught, check Frenzy Charges, check recently cast non-instant skills, but you must have this number reach your maximum stages, or else you're not doing the most damage with your brand. And the way to increase this is I recommend cast speed instead of duration, because cast speed makes you do the damage faster, whereas duration just helps you get to the damage, but you'll be doing it slower. The second breakpoint that you need to watch out for is you need 1% of increased reservation efficiency of skills somewhere on your tree in order to reserve all of your life auras. There's 2 ways to do this. In this league, the easiest way to do it is just to use a 1% reservation efficiency tattoo on a small passive skill. You can also use a corrupted jewel with the implicit, the 2% implicit. Just a note is that the mod has to read increased efficiency of skills. It cannot, or life efficiency. It cannot read mana reservation efficiency. The last point is that you must have enough flask mods and flask modifiers on your gear in order to maintain 100% uptime on your Quicksilver flask. You can check your uptime in POB by changing the slider on your affix, and it will show you the expected uptime on your flask. You definitely want to hit 100%. The reason why we use our Quicksilver as our benchmark is that it is usually the limiting flask, which means that if your Quicksilver has 100% uptime, your other 2 flasks always have 100% uptime as well. There are a couple ways to do this, but the combination that I usually go to is that, assuming that you have my passive skill tree, you have the flask nodes. If you get at least 30% increased flask duration on your belt, you can roll at least 50% charge recovery on your flask, on your Quicksilver flask to get 100% uptime. Definitely quality on your flasks helps if you don't have the ideal modifiers, but again, you can play in POB to figure out what you need for your build. In terms of future-proofing the build and, not relying on league-specific items, this video was made in patch 3.22 with the introduction of tattoos. The only 2 league-specific things that we're using is that one major tattoo that gives us onslaught on hit, as well as a minor tattoo that gives us 1% reservation efficiency of skills. These are definitely very replaceable and not limiting in any way. You can get the reservation efficiency on a Corrupted Jewel, and you can also get onslaught on hit from a ring, synthesized ring, or you could, for a more budget option, you can get onslaught on kill on your brutal restraint timeless jewel. In terms of the cost of the build, in order to get the build going, you basically need a couple of the core items. The first item is the core skiing elixir. This will probably cost you 1 alchemy. No one uses this. It's very available, and they even has a div card. So this is not a problem. You need a brutal restraint with the Balbala dedication. This usually goes from about, let's say, 40 chaos to 2 divinations, 2 divine orbs, depending on the market and if you're trying to hit the best mod, which is non-curse aura effect. The next item is a Prism Guardian. This is currently pretty cheap on trade, like 10 to 20 chaos, but it's usually goes for more like 1 to 2 divines on league start. A reminder, this also has a divination card. You also need a good chest armor. Usually we go with a Sadius Garb. It's probably about 1 to 2 divines for a 6-link base, and then you spam Dense Falses until you hit a decent evasion and energy shield, and then you can use Eldritch Chaos Orbs in order to hit suppression on your suffixes. And this probably usually takes 2 to 5 divines total, depending on your luck. Most of the other uniques and rares are just meant to fill some damage and resistances, and usually pretty accessible from a cost standpoint. In order to take on the Uber bosses, your 3 largest expenses will be Awakened Gems, a decent wand or scepter, and a Watcher's Eye. For this build, the Awakened Gems cost total about 3 divs if you level them yourself. The weapon probably costs around 8 divs, and the Watcher's Eye costs probably around 11 divs. Again, these are absolutely not required to get your 4 Watchstones to take on the normal endgame of Path of Exile, and are only required to push you across the line into uber viable territory. The core build is definitely playable with low and mid investment, and it will absolutely crush regular Pinnacle boss encounters. This last portion of this video is an Uber Maven showcase, in order to give you a sense of what an Uber endgame encounter might look like on this build with the current investment and what the damage output is like. If you made it to this point in the video, I thank you for watching and wish you good luck. If you have any questions or have any problems when you're trying to assemble this build, definitely leave a comment, link your POB, and I can try to give you some advice.
Low on mana. Just need a moment to catch my breath. on mana.
Take this.
The living toy must enjoy our contest.